everybody, welcome to another episode of CVTV Podcast. My name is Carlos, and I'm here with David Dawkin, owner of CoralVue, as well as return visitor Jeremy Meadows. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
How about
How
you?
you doing?
I'm doing well. I want to say thank you for our listeners. Thank you. Welcome back if you're listening. If you're a new subscriber, hey, welcome to this show. If you're a repeat listener, then, welcome back. So today we are going to be talking about something that we all use, carbon, and it's something that we know very little about. I've went online and I did research on it, and there's not much out there,
Yeah.
So
that's why we brought in our resident expert here.
Yes.
I wouldn't
yes.
say expert, but
Yeah.
I've learned a lot in the last couple of years.
He's got a lot of
more than I thought I ever would.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience. And I know, Jeremy, you were here a few episodes back because you also happen to know a lot about GFO.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that I've learned so much about these two little things. And, I going into it when I first started, getting into the media stuff, I was like, okay, GFO carbon, it's GFO and carbon. And honestly, with carbon, if you had asked me 5-10 years ago, carbon's carbon. But I've learned a lot of things in the last couple of years, and it's the biggest thing that I tell a lot of people is not every carbon's the same. And specifically with a lot I've learned from Calgon carbon, Calgon has over 300 different types of carbon. They're all different.
Wow.
They do different things, and they've made a huge business out of it.
Well, I mean, it's one of the most common things to use. I mean, you use it for cleaning. You use it for. I mean, I use it on toothpaste sometimes. For whitening. It just carbon has such a widespread reach on everything we do.
It's used a lot in your house, and a lot of people don't even know. It's in your Brita filters. It's in your fridge, in the little canisters that purify your water. I mean, it really is in a lot of different places, and there's a lot of different types, and we use a lot of different stuff in the aquarium industry for a lot of different things.
I think when you mentioned that, Jeremy, if it's in the aquarium and there's over 300 different types just with Calgon, how is a aquarius supposed to know what they should use or what they're buying?
That's the one big topic that I was talking with one of my part-time job coworkers earlier today. The biggest thing he wanted me to emphasize was the fact of traceability. Don't just buy some random carbon that somebody says is good. Buy a carbon that you actually can tell where it's from. Buy a carbon that is NSF, which means it's safe to put in your drinking water. Traceability is the big thing you can actually learn / know that what you're buying is a good product. Because there are a lot of carbons that are just whatever's cheap. I buy it, I throw it in a bag, I sell it to an end user, and it could leach bad things. It could leach arsenic, it could leach phosphate, it could leach a whole number of things. Is it a virgin product or is it a reclaimed product? There's a lot of different things you should really kind of find out before just throwing something in your really nice fish tank.
Yeah, and I'm also assuming that obviously, hey, every industry is the same. You assume that certain places sell your reputable carbon, but you shouldn't make that assumption, and you should, no matter where you buy it from, you should find out where it comes from. But before we get into the details of carbon and the different types of carbons and which one you should get and all that, let's talk about, just for our newbies, for our new listeners, the ones that are new in the hobby, why do we use carbon in an aquarium? I mean, it makes, once you think about it, it's like, does it really make sense? Or what do you use it for? What's the primary use of carbon?
I mean, honestly, clearing your water out. if it's from bad colors. If freshwater, it's from removing the tannins from your driftwood. It's from overfeeding if you have just pollutants in the water from, putting too much food in your freshwater tank. If it's your reef tank, it's removing medicines, it's removing chemicals that may have accidentally got in your tank. It's just clearing the water up from cloudiness. There's so many different aspects you can use it, and it works well, especially with a lot of thing is getting a good carbon will make the difference between it working and throwing some carbon in the back of your tank and nothing happening.
Okay.
Because, I mean, like I said, 10 years ago, I went through carbon. I didn't think it worked. I didn't think it actually did anything because I was using some bad carbon.
What are some of the misconceptions about what carbon will take out? Will it take out nitrate or phosphate?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
A
lot of people I see it all the time. They think, oh, this is going to strip it all. Put some carbon in there. It's going to fix everything.
Yeah. No, a lot of it is removing organics. It pulls out smells out of your water. It pulls out dyes from foods or medications. It removes a lot of the things, a lot of the organic chemicals that you put in your tank. It removes amino acids if you overdose. It removes some trace elements if you overdose. There's a lot of beneficiary things that you can get with carbon that a lot of people don't think about.
So there's a place for it, there's a place for
definitely.
carbon, and nothing that a water change can do, but sometimes a carbon is just a lot easier to deal with than doing a big water change, especially when you're dealing with chemicals. We deal with that a lot in the skimmer, and when we're doing skimmers, you have no idea how many people reach out to us asking for product support. They purchased a reef octopus skimmer and they install it and it just keeps foaming like crazy. They're just, they turn it on and it just foams. It's almost like you added soap to the water, and they don't understand. They open up the skimmer all the way. They bring the pump, because it's a variable speed pump. They bring it all the way to the lowest speed, yet the skimmer is still just producing this so much foam. And that is a residual sometimes from water conditioning. A lot of our viewers, especially when you're starting and you come from a freshwater setting and you come to saltwater, you think that water conditioning will work with saltwater, and you add that, and technically all you're doing is almost like adding soap to the water, and the skimmer just goes crazy. And the first thing we tell them is like, hey, grab some good quality carbon, put it in the tank, and then let it run for a little bit, and that will remove that chemical, and then the skimmer will simmer down and work correctly.
Yeah.
Jeremy, are there any carbons that will overwork almost to the point of stripping everything to where somebody could damage their aquarium?
Yes and no. If you put too much in, you can strip water. If like anything, a little bit's good, too much is bad. Yeah. So it really depends on your size of your tank, what is going in your tank. It's generally a lot of carbons have use instructions on it. If it's 1 cup per 10 gallons, 1 cup per 50 gallons, you really kind of want to watch what you're doing. You don't want to run a big dose of carbon at all times, because you're going to remove things like iodine from your water really easily. You're going to remove trace elements from your water if you have too much in there. So it kind of depends on your system and what you're doing to what you really want to use for the carbon. Ask your local fish stores. Ask some of your friends in your local fish group. If you're not sure, it's always better to ask questions than just assume.
So what are the most common types of carbon available in the hobby?
The biggest is bituminous carbon. That is probably the most widespread. It's generally a coal-based product. But there's a lot of different bituminous carbon out there. Generally, when you're looking for a carbon, there's different qualifications to how the carbon's graded. which they have different numbers. A lot of times, the most widespread number you hear is the iodine number, which is what it's actually saying is that iodine number is a set amount of iodine that carbon will absorb per concentration per gallon. So it's got a certain amount of carbon, a certain amount of iodine goes into a test vessel, it absorbs, and it tells you how much it absorbs. Okay. The iodine number is actually kind of it's a little misleading because people think the higher the iodine number, the better. But what you actually want to look for is things like a molasses number, a methylene blue, or a tannin number, because the actual pores of the carbon are V-shaped. And what you really want to use carbon for is removing smells, odors, organics, and those are actually a much larger particle. So the bigger the V shape is on the pore of the carbon, the better it absorbs those things. So a higher molasses number, a higher tannin number is actually what you want to look for in a carbon that you're using in your aquarium to remove smells and colors.
Did you know that, Dave? I mean, I've never asked for that. I just go to the store, buy carbon, put it in the tank, and hope it works. So, yeah. I mean, this is pretty cool.
That's definitely really getting to the nitty gritty, and that's something you generally have to ask for from a manufacturer. Our specs like that, they don't really put it on the packaging, because a lot of people will just put, this premium carbon or super carbon. They just randomly say these words that are made up. But when you actually deal with a good carbon, you can go out to, Red Sea or Kolar or even CoralVue's carbon. You can ask for the data sheets, and we've actually got the data sheets that tells you who's the manufacturer, what the methylene blue number, what the iodine number is. We actually have that info, and we'll share it with you to tell you, this is a good product. If you're asking somebody about their carbon, you're like, oh no, it's good, just trust me. Sometimes you might want to question that.
Me. Yeah,
I know companies.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it's super carbon.
I know companies in the industry that have flat out every time they get a new batch of carbon, it's just what's ever on sale at their Chinese supplier. They literally just buy white bags of carbon and put it in containers, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's truly finding out, because that's the bad part is, there's actually manufacturers out there that say every carbon leaches phosphate, and that's not true. It has a lot to deal with the activation process. Some carbons are activated with acids, some carbons are activated with steam, some are washed, some aren't washed.
Yes.
So when they say that, every carbon leaches phosphate, that's not true.
One of the really popular, carbons, and we sell it here, is this ROX 0.8. Any intel on that you can give us, Jeremy? And it's a pelletized carbon.
It is a pelletized carbon. Pellet. It actually works really well. Yeah. Back in the day when Marineland had a good carbon called Black Diamond, that was a really premium carbon. It was really good. They ended up going the commodity route, and it used to actually be a Calgon product. Black Diamond carbon, we know what it is. When we worked with Calgon, we know exactly what product it was, and then they went cheap. Well, when ROX came out, a lot of people thought that this was a phenomenal carbon because it actually worked. The newer products out there don't work as well. But it is a good carbon. It doesn't have as good of a molasses number as I like, but it does have a high iodine number. It's really easy to use. It's really easy to clean. Yeah. It's a very good product to actually, it's very user friendly. So now, that's kind of one of the really nice parts about that.
Another question I have is the typical, the proverbial, to wash or not to wash?
Wash. Always wash.
Okay.
even when they say pre-rinsed, everything like that, carbon is a very soft product. So even if it is washed in transport, you want to always, never want to grind it with your hand. You always want to just gently rinse it off in water, and that will pull those little fines out, and then you put it in your aquarium. Or if you're using a reactor, always rinse your reactor before you put it back in your tank.
Okay.
But yeah,
when you clean it, do you recommend using RO water, or you can use tap water?
A lot of people recommend RO water with a good carbon. I'm perfectly fine using tap water because the carbon's going to work and pull out those impurities that you're rinsing with. I mean, I run a big carbon filter on my house. So instead of worrying about tap water filters and filters in my refrigerator, I have a big giant carbon filter downstairs that I replace once a year. And it's a huge difference on my water in my house.
Wow, that's so interesting. I mean, we use carbon every day, and honestly, I mean, this little 15 minutes right now, we've learned more about carbon than that I thought I ever would, and it's very exciting. You know,
it's so versatile. You use it in your tanks. You can use it on top of your skimmer above the vents to get rid of smells.
Oh yes,
it's great. There's specific carbons you can get to remove chloramines from your water before your RO unit to help the longevity of your membranes. I mean, there's so many different carbons out there and they do great things. It's truly a versatile product.
I think that you bring up a good point with the RO units, the carbon membranes in them, Jeremy. Do they have a lifespan of it on those, or do you know is only so much the carbon can handle? Is it pressurized through the vessel that it's able to?
So one thing about a lot of those cartridges is you'll notice, especially when you're talking chloramines, a lot of them say reduces chloramines. They don't remove. So a lot of places where you're running high chloramines in your source water, it's better to get a catalytic carbon to truly remove chloramines from your water. And you get a lot more longevity out of your other filters. Running pressure containers work really well, or just doing your normal little like RODI canister filled with carbon helps out a lot before it starts going into your RO system. I mean, that will increase longevity on your RO parts greatly.
All right, so we've talked about carbon and the benefits of it, the differences, but let's talk about the drawbacks of using carbon, because just like anything else, there are benefits and there are drawbacks. What are the biggest drawbacks that you know of carbon that you can share with us, so that we, at least if we make the decision of using carbon, we make an educated decision?
Yeah. Biggest drawbacks is if you get a low quality carbon, you leach unwanted things into your tank. Or if you get a reclaimed carbon, you're leaching unwanted things into your tank that throws off your balance, or I mean, worst case scenario, you actually poison things in your tank. That's one of the downsides of cheap carbons, or carbons that you can't trace where they're coming from. You can also strip too much out of your water if you're running too much carbon, or you're running it when it's not needed. You can pull trace elements, amino acids, and stuff like that out of your tank that you're trying to feed.
I've heard also that I've heard also with that there's a speculation. I don't know if it's rumor or anything like that, but that carbon sometimes can be attributed to hole in the head on fish, especially surgeon fish. Is that something that you've heard before? Is that something that
I've heard it? We've done research onto it. You know, it's never been sustainably confirmed. It's been suspected. We've gone back and forth with arguments on it. I mean, my previous job, Boomer was helping us a lot with stuff. We went back and forth talking about it a lot. There's nothing to say yes, but there's also nothing to say definitely no. I know big stores that run carbon on their tanks 24/7. Some of the biggest stores in the industry that have the best coral and the best fish in the industry, they run carbon nonstop. I think a lot of that has to do with quality of carbon. And I mean, it's actually seen a lot less now. A lot of people attribute it also to nutrition. So I personally won't say yes or no.
Okay. Now, you brought a great point in here, if I may ask. What is your recommendation on the use of carbon? 24/7? Is it intermittent? What do you do?
I personally run it 24/7 on freshwater tanks and saltwater tanks. I don't use a lot of it. I generally use a smaller amount, but I run 24/7. The products that I use, I haven't ever had an issue with. I've never seen a negative effect from it, personally. So I run carbon in my freshwater tank all the time. I run carbon in reef tanks all the time. So I have no issue with it running 24/7.
Is there a saturation point in carbon and at which time it would then leach back what it had absorbed into the tank?
Certain elements, yes. If it sits long enough, yes. Other elements, no. Once it's found, it's found.
Yeah.
But if you have a product that is a lot softer and it starts breaking down in your tank, yeah, then it can release that product and go back. The best thing to do is change carbon regularly. When I was doing service, you would go into those tanks that had bags and bags and bags of pre-bagged carbon sitting on the bottom of the tank. And they just would sit there and pile up, and they'd throw. Well, they say I need a new one every month, so I just throw another one in every month. And you walk in there, and there'd be 12, 13 bags of pre-bagged carbon in the bottom of some. So there's arguments. There's also arguments that it just turns into a biomedia. Bacteria live on it, and what they also call like biochar. Like there is certain types of carbon that they use for biomedia. So it can release some, it binds up some, but if a lot of the things that you're trying to remove are that harmful, generally you're switching out that carbon quickly. So it's not going to leach back into your water.
So the best practice, though, is to get on a regimen of replacing this every 4 to 6 weeks, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
No. That's a lot of things. Is a lot of your lower grade carbons, they're going to be exhausted in a week, 2 weeks. Higher grade carbons, I would say 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how much you're moving from your tank. But there's a lot of carbons out there that in 1 to 2 weeks, they're exhausted already.
Ain't that amazing, though? I mean, you're trying to save money, and actually you end up spending 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah. Trying to go cheap.
Yeah.
Yes, trying to go cheap doesn't pay off. I mean, we've always said this in this hobby. It's like with skimmers, with equipment, don't go cheap. If you go cheap, you're going to end up paying twice as much.
Yeah,
it's definitely true.
So this is great. So it removes the tannins, the yellowing in the water. It removes medications. It can remove some unwanted trace elements, but it also removes some wanted trace elements if you don't use it correctly. There's different types of carbon that, you have to make sure that you have that the carbon that you purchase has some kind of traceability, so you know what it is. You're using virgin carbon better, that you're not using repurposed carbon, because then you don't know what the hell they were using it prior to you using it. So those are the little tips that I've actually gathered from this conversation,
Jeremy, if somebody's looking for, the traceability that we're talking about on their carbon, should they ask the manufacturer for a MSDS? Is that what
actually, and not even so much the MSDS, but actually ask for the product sheet. Like Calgon has product sheets,
a cut sheet
that tell you what it's made of, what the source material is, how it's been washed, how it's been activated. And then it'll have the actual spec numbers on it, the iodine number, the methylene blue, the molasses number. All of that's on a good sourced carbon. It has all of that on that spec sheet.
Good deal.
One more thing that I can attribute to carbon is marriage. because the smell of skimmit, it's so bad, but having that carbon filter on top of the waste collector and you can't smell it at all is, oh my God, because prior to that, I probably wouldn't be married if that was around.
Or that fishy smell when you walk into the tank that's really yellow and you're like, yeah, I can smell that tank.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I better change the carbon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I think it was
good info.
This is good information. It's always great to have you around because you're a wealth of knowledge. I mean, it's just a little bit. You got the experience. We always said what Tulio said. You are not an expert. You just have enough experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know a whole lot of things, and not an expert on anything, but I know enough to be dangerous.
Right. I think that goes for all of us.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So just want to say thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
I want to say thank you to our listeners and for listening. As always, if you like the podcast, if you like the information, subscribe, and you'll be notified whenever a new podcast is released. Thank you, Dave, as always, for co-hosting this podcast.
Thank you guys for being here.
It's always fun, and we'll see you guys later.